I just wanted to play video games.
Okay, guys, it's time to talk about Mixtape. So, Mixtape is a new game that's been doing the rounds because of the incredible reviews it's been getting. 9s and 10s on large websites like IGN. And of course, the gamers don't like it. And this could simply be something that we throw out as, well, whatever. They decided to side with this artsy game because it's like not like other games, just like I'm not like other girls, and that should just be dismissed or thrown out. But I think that this is important to look at because we are looking at not just like this obviously astroturfed video game that is getting funding from big orgs, billionaires. I think Smash JT has a video on it, and I'll probably talk more about that in the Week in Culture this weekend. But also because it is trying to shape the culture, and it's doing it in, it's usually when you do it in these really like cutesy ways that like lean heavily on nostalgia or these kind of visual quirks or a style choice or music. It's all very emotionally charged stuff. And I think that people should recognize when, they're being had, when they're being manipulated. And that's what this is about. This is about manipulation. And one of the primary ways that I see that happening, that I think is most telling, is in the conversation about whether or not Mixtape is woke. As though being woke is the one sort of like, qualifying or disqualifying characteristic of a given product that determines whether or not it deserves our support or should be something we should be suspicious of. And I would argue that even though people like, and I'll give you some examples, 8-bit Eric made a video called Everyone Called Mixtape Woke, So I Played It, and I don't think that he thinks it is. A lot of people are saying it's not woke, it's not DEI in any way, and there are no agendas being pushed. And these are people who don't like the game, they don't think it's a good game. They do think it's they probably believe it's astroturfed in some way, but they don't think that there's anything woke about it. They don't think it's like relooted 48 ex voto or something like that. Something that is really obvious, has a bunch of random people of color in it, or it has like a plot about being anti-capitalist or anti-supremacist or whatever, right? It's fighting bigotry. It's got non-binary creatures in a fantasy setting like, Dragon Age the Veilguard. But the thing is, that's not how this game is woke. And I think that there's a couple of things that people should recognize that, woke is not just about identity politics. Woke is not just about criticizing capitalism or, being feminist or whatever. It's not just those things. It doesn't wear it that obvious. Actually, when it's very, very, let's say, under the radar or slow or cautious, that makes it more insidious. That means it's easier to not pay attention to. So I'm going to explain how Mixtape is woke in almost the worst kind of way. So first, let's talk about what the plot of the game is. So we're looking at basically a game that's a narrative. It's like a visual novel. And you're basically going through a story involving some teenagers that, it's like their last summer together or whatever. And they're going to go off and basically try to become adults. And it's in I think it's in Northwest America, like Portland area, which should be a red flag right off the bat. But you have the usual kind of teen drama that's, amplified as existential crisis, right? Now, of course, as teenagers, we've all experienced something like that. But you see, that's how it gets you. It tells you this is relatable, but that doesn't necessarily make it authentic. And I think that the other thing is there are no real stakes in the game. And not just because it's not a game, which I'll get to later, but because the thing that is, the most, the most impending in terms of potential consequences are are we gonna talk to each other still? Is that girl interested in somebody else? And there's a little bit of queer coded things in it. Again, it doesn't go there like a woke game you would expect a woke game to go, but it doesn't matter. It implies a lot, it suggests a lot of these things, and it's using nostalgia to sell it, which is why you will have basically they just load it up with as many these cliches as it can. And a lot of times when these products do that, it's like Stranger Things. Stranger Things tried to sell nostalgia as part of the product. I watched the first season of it. I wasn't really that impressed. And one of the reasons why it bothered me was because it was clearly made by people who didn't live through the 80s, but they know the 80s through 80s media. So they watched movies from the 80s, and they watched TV shows from the 80s, and they maybe saw some ads, and they knew what the fashion looked like, and they listened to the music, but they didn't live through it. So when they presented their product, Stranger Things, it was like a modern story wearing the skin of the 80s. So it didn't feel really authentic. It wasn't really the 80s. It wasn't even close to it. Like, I lived through that. I know that it wasn't like the way they presented it. And so for me, it just struck as, I felt like I was being manipulated. I felt like I was being lied to about the reality. Now, I know that no show could actually capture a time period, but it's sort of like how a lot of shows tried to capture different periods in history, and they often distort them because they're trying to suit it to a certain narrative. For example, and I know that I'm getting in a tangent here, but the Mad Men. Mad Men was a show that takes place in the 60s, and it was about guys that work in the advertising industry. And the degree to which they severely distorted not just like the realities of the characters that they were based on, which is absolutely like, it's almost criminal how much they changed them. Even though I did enjoy the show for what it was, but I knew they were lying to me, not just about those characters, but about the time period itself, because they were looking at it through their modern, like, woke, because that's what it is. It's a modern neoliberal worldview that was being applied to 1960s, and all they could do was amplify the ways that the 60s were, regressive or homophobic or, chauvinistic to women or whatever. And that was like the only thing, even though there's a lot of things that you could look at in the 60s and say, wow, they had a lot of things that were better as well. And a lot of things were also very nuanced. It's the same thing with Stranger Things as well. They had to tell you, remember in the Stranger Things, there was some, in the 80s, people were pretty homophobic, people were pretty racist, right? And of course, to them, that hasn't changed today. So would I say that Stranger Things is woke? Well, yeah, I think that's evidenced now. But even back then, I thought there was something weird about the way it was presented. And this game does something very similar. So for example, the main character in the game, whose name I can't be bothered to remember, it doesn't really matter. Her story is that her father, who is a hardworking, successful man, and he has essentially raised himself a very intelligent daughter that could go places and be successful, and he wants her to do that. And she's a very well-educated daughter that's also got athletic aspirations as well. She wins trophies and such, and so there's a lot of potential, but she doesn't want to do any of that because she wants to just do drugs and be free and whatever, just live her young life. And so they frame her father, and this is how it's woke in this way. They frame her father, who just wants the best for her, as the villain of the story because he wants what's best for her and because he's her father. So right off the bat, now, is this about, does she do a whole, monologue about how as a woman she can't, she has it really hard because of the patriarchy or whatever, or because she might have semi-lesbianic feelings for her friend, that's the world's keeping her down because it's so homophobic? No, none of that happens. But she is inherently rebelling against her dad, who wants the best for her, and the game frames that as he is the villain of the story, even though the story doesn't really have any villains per se because there are no stakes, like I said. So that right there is a clue. Now, of course, people can make defenses. Kids always rebel against their parents. Do they though? I think we're told that a lot, but I wonder if it isn't the case that in most cases, if your family is functional and you respect and love your parents and they respect and love you, that you won't rebel against them, but in fact follow their guidance and wisdom. Is that possible? And I think that we get these stories about ourselves told to us enough times that we start to believe them, and we don't actually think, well, is this true? Does this apply? to people? Is this the case? And I wonder about that. And I do think that it's very interesting that we have accepted the premise that for a young person to not want to be like their parents is normal. And I think that we get that from our culture, from our media, but it's not necessarily true. In fact, respect and love for your family and where you come from is much older, and it's much stronger than this kind of disobedient, rebellious streak that's been encouraged in people for the last, say, 3 or 4 generations, probably since the silent generation. And yeah, I think that is a sign of the times. So there's that. And now I want to get to like the real big reason why I think this game is woke is that it is an anti-game. It is like Gone Home and Depression Quest. So for those of you guys who don't remember, or maybe you weren't around for that, or you're too much of a young guy that's new to this thing, back in right before the original Gamergate started, a developer, I use the term loosely, Zoe Quinn created her own game called Depression Quest. And this is what started Gamergate, because her game was a text-based game, so it didn't have any graphics at all. It was just text-based. And it was not even something where you can type something into like Zork. It was like multiple choice, and you just picked choices about like what you would do with your day. But the gimmick of Depression Quest was that no choices were available to you that were at all productive or involved you actually making an effort to like trying to do something, with yourself, because surprise, you were depressed. And so when you're depressed, nothing matters and you don't want to do anything. And that was her game. It was a non-game. It was like less than a game. It was less than a movie. Like it was a movie that goes nowhere, that had no visuals. It was just text. Your choices didn't matter because nothing matters. That was the point of the game. It was called Depression Quest because it would give you depression. Okay? So that was criticized by people as an absolute joke. Now, it could have just been something that was like thrown out. But unfortunately, Zoe Quinn had connections with people that worked in the industry who basically like praised her product as some kind of like deep artwork that was like a new way of looking at video games, right? Which is basically to make them unplayable and trash. And so when I saw that, I said, this is not even a book. Like, this is awful. Like, this is the worst piece of media. Again, you have a right to make it. And I think she was actually, I may be wrong, but I think she was selling it. It doesn't matter though. So that was like that started the whole thing, because people started wondering, like, how could this girl, make this absolute travesty, this abortion of a game, and somehow get praise from journalists. And it kind of was the thing that started the whole Gamergate controversy. It was the Depression Quest. It was one of the first things. That's before we got into learning about the absolute incestuous nature of the industry and Zoe Quinn's part in that. We might revisit that at some other point. If you're interested, I can go into it, but it's all over the internet. You can probably find out. And then you got later, but not much later, there was another game that was released called Gone Home. And Gone Home was also a non-game. It was basically, it looked like it could have been some kind of, horror title of some kind, because it was from the first person and you were going into this house, and it was, it was atmospheric, but then you realize that Gone Home was nothing. It was a walking simulator, hardly a visual novel, and the point about Gone Home was to learn essentially you were a girl that had a lesbian relationship that their parents didn't approve of, and I think, you're running away or something. I don't know. It doesn't matter. It was stupid. It was woke. It was trash. And it was $10. And again, it got massive praise from journalists. They loved it. They thought it was like the best thing since sliced bread, and everyone should give that studio $10 to, play this walking simulator that you could literally finish. I think there's like a speed run done that you can beat it in just a few minutes if you just rush through and to the end, and nothing happens in it. There are no stakes, there are no enemies, there's no combat. It's not, particularly graphically interesting. It was just a walking simulator with a really dumb story. Now, I am not, again, because I feel like there are sometimes I get comments that are really, really retarded. I am not saying it should never exist, and I'm not saying no one can buy it. If that's what you like, you can have that, but don't call it a game. Let's come up with something else. Let's not call it a game. Let's not pretend it's a game, because it isn't a game. A game has like choices that matter and consequences. Like, that's the thing that makes it different from any other medium. That's what makes it not a movie. That's what makes it, not a book or a television show, is that you actually can alter the outcome, and that's why people like them. They're completely different from any other medium. So Gone Home came out, and when this came out, and sure, there have been games that have done some gameplay, and that's the thing. Like, I think that Dustborn is better than this, because Dustborn at least had some mechanics in it, I mean, it's trash, I wouldn't play it, but it had mechanics in it. Like, this game has nothing. You walk around, you interact with objects, and it starts a memory which plays a minigame which you cannot fail, and then you move on to the next thing. And I guess once you've gone through all of the flashbacks, I assume there's some kind of conclusion. But everything in it is foregone. You cannot change the outcome. Input doesn't really matter. It just affects like the pace at which you experience everything. Everything is pre-scripted. Like, there's no escaping it, right? And on top of that, it doesn't really have anything to say other than, wanting to be successful and productive in a modern first world country is bad because you're not allowed to be artistic and free. So what I think is, it is woke insofar as it is a deconstruction of what a video game is. And this is a very important problem that is being highlighted here that I don't think enough people recognize. Because if you just say it's woke because it's got black people in it or whatever, you're not paying attention. Because what's more dangerous than that is saying, what even is a video game? What even is it? Why can't they just be like visual novels? Even though we already have visual novels. No, let's make video games like visual novels. Let's reward video games that deconstruct what the very concept of a video game. This game got a 10 from IGN, and Black Myth Wukong got a 6. Crimson Desert got a 7. This game got a 10. Hey guys, Editing Brian here. So I have some additional information that I wanted to add on, and hopefully this will fit well and not ruin the continuity too much of my video, but there's some things I learned after I recorded the video that I feel like I really have to add right now. So the game was published by Annapurna Interactive, which is founded and led by Megan Ellison. Megan Ellison is the daughter of Larry Ellison, the co-founder and major shareholder of Oracle, with a net worth in the hundreds of billions. This guy's like one of the richest people on earth. This gives Annapurna access to significant capital that most independent, and I use the word independent very loosely here, most independent studios lack. Beethoven and Dinosaur is supposedly a small studio whose previous title, The Artful Escape, followed a similar short narrative-focused format with Annapurna's backing. Mixtape received a large budget for a 90s licensed soundtrack, which, music soundtracks cost a lot of money, high-end visuals, marketing, and day one placement on Xbox Game Pass. Putting it on Xbox Game Pass costs money as well, but it's good because, again, like I said before about the awards are good for optics, so is Game Pass, because then you get to say, look at how many millions of people played our game. This is how you advertise it, as it sells well, even though it's not selling anything. It's people are playing it. Think of it like library, borrowing from the library. If a lot of people borrow a book from the library and the author of the book can say, look at how many times this book's been bought, but it hasn't been, right? It's been borrowed. So critics argue that this creates an uneven playing field. A small team with billionaire level resources can produce polished nostalgia content that receives outsized attention compared to other games from studios that don't have the same connections or money. So this is not only not a game, it's not even an indie game. It's not even an indie non-game. So Annapurna also sent out premium press kits and swag bags that containing retro-themed merchandise like custom mixtapes, branded audio gear, etc. to journalists and influencers. Several recipients publicly praised these kits. While gift giving is common in the industry, the scale and the timing combined with review embargoes raised questions about whether these incentives contributed to uniformly positive coverage. Major outlets, like I mentioned before, IGN, GameSpot, Polygon, etc., gave the game high scores, very high scores, and used similar language in all their reviews. They said they emphasize vibes and nostalgia and emotional storytelling while acknowledging limited traditional gameplay. I think in many of the reviews, they all use the same phrase, comparing it to the director John Hughes. They like, and it was almost like they were all getting the same script. Again, this is not something we haven't seen before, but I think it's definitely worth bringing up again. What I'm seeing here is what has happened with Hollywood, what's going on with the film industry, right? What I mean is, if you look at the Academy Awards, which I used to watch, like back in the day, I used to like care about what movies might win or whatever because I had my favorite picks, and I'm a big cinephile, but I haven't been to the movies in years because movies have been trash for a long time. And it's basically because Hollywood has gone like off the rails, like completely lost. I mean, I don't want to get into the Odyssey. That looks like an absolute train wreck. But what's going on with the Academy Awards is that the purpose of it was simply to boost the profiles and visibility of certain films over others. So if you had a movie, if you wanted your movie to sell, it was very effective to be able to put in your trailers nominated for this number of Academy Awards, one for Best Picture, one for Best Screenplay, whatever. And that on its own is sort of like the Midas touch. People would see that and they'd say, oh, that's a good, it won awards from these very prestigious and like, you know, intelligent people that know a lot more about movies than I do, so I'm gonna watch it. But then you look at what's always being promoted, what's always being praised by the Academy, and it's all like very subversive, woke, you know, feminist stuff, right? And that's consistent. Like, if you want a movie to win for an Academy Award, that's why we have a period in the year called Oscar bait, where like a bunch of like these dramas come out like sort of like in the winter time because they're Oscar bait movies, and they're almost always like, you know, about slavery, or they're about Jim Crow, or, you know, some kind of race struggle that's been going on. They'll be about women in like, you know, in certain fields that are unrecognized. Like, here's a woman that, you know, invented this thing, whatever, you know, or it'll be about something abstract, like just like a general commentary on, you know, I don't know, like the trans community, or being gay and fat, like Brendan Fraser. He won, you know, awards for The Whale, and was it because he was really good in it? Well, if you're a good actor, then you're good in everything. But he won because he was in that movie that was about a gay fat guy that was dying, as opposed to, I don't know, when he was in The Mummy. I mean, I know The Mummy would never win an Academy Award because it's an action film that men like, but you see what I'm saying, right? So, unironically, there should be a completely different award show for movies that guys like. I swear. Because, like, the Academy doesn't like anything men like. The only time they ended up caving was because I think Return of the King had to win, because they basically snubbed the other two Lord of the Rings films, and they were so big the Academy couldn't ignore it, otherwise they would lose credibility because people would be like, why aren't you giving this awards? So the purpose of the Academy Awards is not to award the best films. The purpose of the Academy Awards is to boost the visibility of films that the Academy and the culture of Hollywood believes are important, and they're doing this to video games. This is why this game is getting awards. This is why this game, I guarantee you, will be nominated, if not win Game of the Year at the Game Awards at the end of 2026, or games like it. And there are others down the pipe. And these people support and fund activist consulting groups like Sweet Baby Inc. and Anita Sarkeesian, who does that now. I mean, this is like how deep The Rock goes. So for people who don't think that Mixtape is woke, I have news for you. It is, and it is in the worst way, because it is the anti-game. It is the game that isn't a game, and it is what they want games to be, because what they hate the most about video games is that you have control over the outcomes. You get to make choices that matter, and they don't like that because they don't think you should be able to do that. They think that they should be able to spoon feed you a narrative about whatever they want, and then you just consume it. So anyway, I just wanted to talk a little bit about Mixtape and give you my thoughts on it. If you guys, you know, let me know if you've played it. I have no interest in this game at all. It's not even a game as far as I'm concerned, but I want to know what you guys think. So have you guys played Mixtape? Have you seen playthroughs? I mean, you can watch the whole thing on YouTube. It's like an hour, 2.5 hours long. It's like a movie. So if you guys want to let me know what you guys think about this one in the comments. Is Mixtape woke? Do you understand where I'm coming from when I say that it is? Because it is a subversion of what video games are. Let me know. And yeah, please like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Long live Vivian.
I just wanted to play video games.